The Zephyrian hunting party moved through the dense undergrowth of Kepler 442b with practiced silence. Their elongated limbs, evolved for navigating the towering crystalline forests of their homeworld, carried them effortlessly between the alien trees. Commander Vexthul's four eyes scanned the terrain ahead, their heat-sensitive membranes detecting the faint thermal signature they had been tracking for 3 standard hours. "The human is close," whispered Scout Leader Crix, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. The thermal trace grows stronger. Vexthul's thorax vibrated with satisfaction. When the Terran scout ship had crashed on this remote world 2 days ago, the Galactic Coalition had dispatched his elite hunting unit to capture the survivor. Humans were notorious for their unpredictability in combat. But this was just one lone scout against 12 of the Coalition's finest trackers. The Zephyrians had studied human combat patterns extensively. Humans were aggressive but crude, relying on brute force rather than the elegant tactical precision that defined civilized warfare. They were also remarkably fragile. Their single heart, centralized nervous system, and soft skin made them vulnerable to tactics that would barely inconvenience a properly evolved species. "Remember," Vexthul transmitted through their shared neural link, "the human must be taken alive. The Coalition needs to understand their new weapon technologies." The hunting party spread into their standard containment formation, a perfect hexagonal pattern that had never failed to capture prey. Vexthul allowed himself a moment of professional pride. The human scout would soon learn why the Zephyrians were considered the galaxy's premier hunters. That's when the first trap triggered. Scout Leader Crix simply vanished in a burst of superheated plasma, his anguished death cry cutting short mid-transmission. The hunting party froze, their heat vision scanning frantically for the source of the attack. "Impossible," breathed Tracker Nexaval. There was no energy signature, no weapon discharge warning. A second plasma burst silenced him permanently. Then a third claimed Vexthul's communication specialist. The commander's tactical mind raced. No weapon in the known galaxy could fire without generating detectable energy signatures. Yet somehow the human was picking off his team with impossible precision while remaining completely invisible to their sensors. "Scatter pattern Omega," Vexthul commanded, but even as his remaining hunters dispersed, he could hear the soft whisper of movement in the forest around them. Not the clumsy crashing he'd expected from a primitive human, but something far more subtle. The sound of a predator that had been watching them long before they thought they were hunting it. Hunter Yexrun's thermal signature suddenly spiked to lethal levels before disappearing entirely. Vexthul realized with growing horror that the human wasn't using energy weapons at all. Somehow, the creature was turning their own body heat against them, causing catastrophic thermal feedback through methods his scientific training couldn't comprehend. "Commander!" Tracker Zalfin's voice cracked with panic. "I'm detecting movement, signatures all around us, but they don't match any known species profile. It's as if the forest itself is hunting us." Vexthul's 4 hearts began beating in the rapid staccato rhythm of mortal fear. The human wasn't just hiding. It was orchestrating the very environment against them. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves, every thermal gradient had been weaponized. Another hunter died, this time consumed by what appeared to be aggressive plant growth that erupted from the ground beneath his feet. The biosigns suggested the vegetation had been modified, enhanced somehow to respond to specific genetic markers. "By the void gods," Vexthul whispered, understanding flooding through him like ice water. "It's not one human. It's an entire ecosystem." The terrible truth became clear as his remaining team members fell one by one to an increasingly creative array of environmental hazards. The human scout hadn't crashed on this world by accident. It had been here for months, possibly years, studying the native flora and fauna, learning to bend an entire planet to its will. Humans weren't crude warriors after all. They were ecosystem engineers, biological architects capable of turning any environment into an extension of their own tactical capabilities. The Coalition had sent hunters to capture prey, never realizing they were walking into a trap that spanned an entire continent. When only Vexthul remained, the forest finally fell silent. He stood alone in a clearing, his weapon systems useless, his tactical superiority reduced to nothing more than arrogant delusion. That's when the human scout finally revealed itself. She emerged from what Vexthul had taken for a natural rock formation, her form seeming to peel away from the stone itself. Her appearance was unremarkable by galactic standards. No natural weapons, no enhanced sensory organs, no obvious evolutionary advantages. Just a small, soft creature with primitive binocular vision and laughably vulnerable anatomy. But her eyes held the patient intelligence of something that had spent months turning an entire world into a carefully orchestrated death trap. "Commander Vexthul of the 3rd Zephyrian Hunting Expedition," she said in perfectly accented galactic standard. "Welcome to my home." The human gestured to the forest around them, and Vexthul finally understood what he was seeing. Every tree, every vine, every seemingly natural formation had been carefully cultivated and positioned. The crashed scout ship hadn't been an accident. It had been bait, designed to lure the Coalition's hunters into a web that had been years in the making. "Your Coalition wants to understand human weapon technologies," the scout continued, her voice carrying the casual confidence of an apex predator addressing its captured prey. "Here's your first lesson. We don't build weapons. We become them." As the modified flora began to close in around him, Commander Vexthul transmitted one final message to the Coalition fleet waiting in orbit. "Cancel the invasion. We're not the hunters here. We never were." The human scout watched with professional interest as the forest claimed its final victim, then turned her attention to the communications array she'd been building from salvaged Coalition technology. It was time to call home. Humanity's expansion into this sector could begin ahead of schedule. The Zephyrians had taught her something valuable about galactic combat doctrine. The other species relied too heavily on technology, on weapons and tactics and formations. They'd forgotten the most basic truth of warfare. The deadliest predator is the one that turns the entire world into its hunting ground. And humans, she reflected with satisfaction, had always been very good at making themselves at home.